welcome to QCDC Career Cafe and our fourth session. It is a great pleasure to meet you again in our small virtual career guidance community. My name is Efrosini Dimitrios, and I have the privilege to work with QCDC for the last 8 years as a Senior Career Programs and Services Officer. Together with Paige McDonough, we will navigate today's session with our esteemed panel guests and attendees. Before we start, I would like to share a few words about QCDC with our new joiners. The Qatar Career Development Center is a member of Qatar Foundation under the Community Development Division with the mission to empower Qatar's youth to respond to the requirements of the Qatar National Vision 2030 by instilling career guidance within Qatar's socioeconomic culture. QCDC supports students to better plan their career paths in line with their potential and the future needs of Qatar's labor market. It also equips parents and career practitioners with career guidance knowledge and information needed so they may best advise and guide the students. QCDC also aims to enrich and support career guidance policymaking and practices by contributing to quality career literature, insights, and consulting, as well as offering high-quality career services by professional experts. To set the tone for today's session, I would like to start with some useful information for our attendees. This webinar is recorded and it will be shared with you together with Qatar's national AI strategy and the presentation. We encourage your participation through questions that you can type in the chat box or address directly live. We kindly ask to keep your microphones muted during the presentation. And also, please take the time to fill the survey at the end of this session, as your opinion is of much value to us. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Paige to take the lead, and we will continue.
Yes, thank you, Sini. So today we have a very special guest speaker with us for our Career Cafe session, and he's going to be telling us all about artificial intelligence, a technology that is becoming more widely adopted by businesses globally. As career practitioners, it's imperative that we understand the implications of this technology in order to better prepare and support our students, not just for a career in AI, but also for a workplace with integrated AI technologies. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the floor over to Dr. Sanjay Chawla, who's the Research Director of QCRI's Data Analytics Group. So Dr. Sanjay, I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Paige. Thanks, Sini. Should I share my video? Okay, maybe I will. Okay, so welcome everybody, and can you see my slides?
Not yet, Dr. Sanjay.
Okay, one second. Let me just make sure I share them.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. So welcome again. My name is Sanjay Chawla, and I'm with QCRI, which is part of HBKU University, HBKU, which is part of Qatar Foundation. And I'll briefly talk about the national AI strategy that we developed with the Ministry of Transportation and Communication. And I'll just go through sort of brief overview of the strategy, and then I'll spend some time on, I think, topics which would be of particular interest to the career counseling and development community. So, just a few words about QCRI. QCRI has been around for over 10 years. It is one of the 3 national research institutes in Qatar Foundation, the other 2 being on biomedical and energy and environment. And we have a very diverse staff here. We have over 140 people from over 30 countries, and many of our scientists and engineers have a background from both academia and industry. Before coming to QCRI, I was a professor at the University of Sydney in Australia, and we have people from all over the world. So just a few words about AI. You probably have heard of AI. Of course, the term has been around since the 1950s, and it has sort of come back into to the forefront in the last 10 years. I'll probably explain why that's the case. And so, anyways, what we do at QCRI has relationships, with AI. For example, we have a very strong Arabic language technologies group, and they do things like machine translation, speech recognition, Arabic to English. We also have a new project called Tanbi, which is about detecting fake news or propaganda in Arabic literature, Arabic news. We have a very old social computing group, and they work in areas like they work with the United Nations, and they work with education above all, and many development agencies about how social media analysis can be used in many situations like disaster crisis response. We have more like a fundamental kind of a group, foundations group, data analytics group, which I'm part of, and we also have a cybersecurity group. Anyway, so and then we also have what's called the software engineering team, which takes a lot of the research that comes out of these groups and tries to make products out of them, software that can be used by the community at large. So as I briefly mentioned earlier, AI has been around since the 1950s. In fact, the term was coined in 1956 at a workshop in the US, and it has gone up and down, but in the last 10 years or so, there's been a confluence of three things which has really resurrected it. One is the large availability of data, what's called big data, and computing power. You've heard of cloud computing. You've heard of Amazon Web Services, for example of cloud computing. And of course, algorithms, which essentially process this big data on these big computers, and they come up with results and new insights. And for example, I'll come back to it a little bit later. A lot of the, if you use Google Translate, a lot of that underlying technology is basically processing big data on big computers using, new algorithms. So, there's been a sort of a global race for AI. Many countries have come up with their own national strategies. Canada was an early one. A lot of the sort of the new research in AI has actually come from Canada. And then, there've been other countries like South Korea and China and Norway, Italy, and then again, South Korea. The first one was Japan. And there was a White House summit on AI in 2018. And then in 2019, as I mentioned, QCRI worked with the Ministry of Transportation and Communication, and the national AI strategy was launched in October for Qatar. So, this strategy has already attracted some attention. The Stanford University, for example, compiles an index of AI activity, and they noted the strategy of Qatar. So briefly, the strategy is divided into several pillars. They range from talent, which I'm sure you would be very interested in, data, the role of data, especially, how employment will be impacted by AI, what we call AI augmented employment, AI future, what industries to focus on in Qatar, where AI can be very useful. and also the ethics and governance of data and AI. So I won't go into these into these pillars in too much detail, because I want to spend some time taking questions and also interacting, and also spend some time on things that may be of interest what I think may be of interest to you. So the most important thing is data. That you probably have heard. Data is now becoming the so-called the new oil of technology. 30 years ago, it was not data but software which was the key. But now, people give out software for free, but data is the key. So it's almost like a code inversion. So data is the key driver. And I think even though people know about it, it's sometimes hard to appreciate how important data is. And every country needs to secure its data resource. Every individual needs to secure their data, and also aggregated at the country level that needs to be secured. So, data will sort of drive, a lot of the work in cybersecurity, in medicine, in transportation. That's already happening in QCRI, in particular, also in Qatar. But Qatar is a sort of a small country. So, it needs to form, at least in the strategy we mentioned, that it needs to form data partnerships perhaps with other small countries. And in return, it needs to, suppose you want access to medical data aggregate medical data from another country. Qatar can, form partnerships and arrangements. For example, in transportation, we may want data from a big country like China or the US. In return, we can say, you could use, you could test drive or use some parts of Qatar because they have new infrastructure as test beds. So, data exchange has to be governed, and it needs to be treated like a resource. So, here's one example, how powerful data can be. So, for example, this is just one example. So where, you could use, for example, very simple, I would say relatively simple machine learning and AI technology to just diagnose, retinopathy in remote areas. And earlier, this would be a very expensive proposition, but now, with AI, you can actually do it in a very inexpensive fashion, like it's shown here. In QCRI, we've also worked on many AI-related technologies. I just want to give you an example of how, we were able to recreate the map of Doha using machine learning and AI. So here you can see we use data from Carva taxis to first infer the road network from Qatar, and then we, for areas for which we did not have taxi data, we were able to use satellite imagery and extract the road network. So, this shows how powerful, algorithms and data can be. And if you use Google Maps in Qatar, sometimes it's not very accurate because the roads are changing all the time. So this project was about how we can use data to quickly infer the actual road network in Doha. So as I mentioned earlier, data is the sort of the oil and gas of the 21st century. And since Qatar has a vision, 2030 vision of transforming itself to a knowledge economy. And so data will play a very, very important role. Again, feel free to stop me and ask questions. Anyway, so we also in the strategy talk about talent, what needs to be, how to develop and nurture talent in Qatar. How we recommend how from K to 12 there should be some program to teach data science and basics of AI, how to attract people from other parts of the world to help build an AI industry for Qatar, and what are the current roadblocks and how they can be overcome. So I'll sort of skip. I'll come back to this and skip this for the moment. Then we talk about employment. How there's a lot of fear about AI, that AI will replace jobs, and jobs will be replaced with AI technology. And what we have proposed in the strategy is that actually it will be AI augmented jobs. So certain tasks could be automated, but new jobs will also be created. But people need to learn how to work with AI, help them do certain tasks within their job tasks, which can be done with AI's help, but certain tasks will probably continue to stay, will always require human involvement. Then we also have a pillar on employment, and when we observe the current the profile in Qatar, it's quite interesting that 5% of non-Qataris and 27% of Qataris have clerical positions, but most of the Qatari workforce has a university education. So there's a great mismatch between capability and use. Okay, so there's actually a lot of potential here. We could, the Qatari workforce could be trained to work on AI-related jobs or jobs that require AI capability. And one of the things that we are trying to do currently is to write a white paper on how to bridge this gap. We know there's a lot of potential here, and how can we direct that towards creating an industry where a lot of the local workforce could actually work in high-end technology related tasks. There are lots of studies on this, and we are also doing one that how will the landscape change, and what AI will replace and what will not replace, and where will they work together. Sometimes people have proposed these rules of thumb that something that takes a human a few seconds and tasks that are repetitive and do not require too much physical activity could be replaced with AI. We think that's that rule of thumb is too coarse. I think, as I mentioned earlier, the future we think is more about where AI technology and humans actually work in conjunction, and not that one will be replaced by another. We also, in the strategy, talk about economic opportunities for Qatar, where it can take advantage of AI technology. One thing you may have noticed, Qatar has already a very sophisticated digital governance system like Matrash. You can get these apps, Matrash, Hukumi, and I think this can be used to build up an AI ecosystem. And also, Qatar has a very good medical tourism has a good reputation in medical tourism. Of course has Qatar Foundation for higher education, and also some very good companies like Qatar Airways. So here are these are the opportunities where AI could really help them gain a competitive advantage. So and as I quickly go through this, I don't want to spend on each of these areas, but there are several areas where we think Qatar has a good opportunity to exploit AI. Anyway, so I'll skip the other parts, and I want to quickly get into ethics and public policy a little bit. You may have heard about, for example, if you have an autonomous vehicle and it's driving, and you may have heard of examples where autonomous vehicles have been in an accident and some lives have been lost. What is the ethics of that? Who's responsible for that? Who's responsible for your data? These are very, very important questions, and in Qatar they need to be addressed in confirmation with local cultural and religious norms. So a lot of work needs to be done in ethics and public policy, and I think QCDC can actually help shape some of this. Also, privacy guidelines. It's shocking how much of our data. We use free email. We constantly browse websites. We go to YouTube. How much of our data is constantly being released without we've given permission, but we often don't understand what are the implications of that. And I think we need to spend some time trying to understand how important data is and what are the ethical and public policy issues surrounding it. Okay. So yeah, this is a slide that I want to spend some time with about AI and STEM. There's, as career counselors, there may be a lot of questions that you might be getting about AI, and I think it's important to understand, as I mentioned earlier, the role of data. When the AI field was sort of started in the 50s, a lot of the work was on logic and rules. So the idea was that if we can just write down all the for example, if you're a doctor, if you could just write down all the rules that they use to diagnose a disease, then you could actually code that into a computer, and that would be the end of it. But it turned out it's much more complex, and that's why there's been a modern AI is basically predicated on data. And one big success story is language translation. So it's completely data driven. There's almost no linguistic rules that go into designing language translation system. Is mostly data driven. So you get a big corpus of paired data. So for example, you could get speeches from or text from the UN, in English and in say Arabic and UN or in French, English and French, and you just apply these what are called deep learning algorithms, and they can actually create a model, and then you can just give it a sentence in English and it'll output something in French. So, but the interesting thing is that even though it might look very complicated, a lot of it is not very, very far away from high school math. Actually, it's almost like what we teach in high school about line fitting. It's not that far from there. Of course, you need huge amounts of data. You need huge amounts of computing power. But the fundamental principle of doing this machine learning and AI is quite simple. Okay. And I also think that using modern AI examples in schools and in colleges can actually enliven teaching. For example, if you give examples from AI, give examples from search, and show how mathematical techniques are used to develop mathematical ideas are used to develop techniques for language translation, for vision, for face recognition, then I think that'll really excite the students about what they're doing. The math they're learning, the physics they're learning is actually applicable in real world settings. Okay. And that's also led to data science. Often people use some people prefer to use data science instead of AI. So it's sort of emerging as a new discipline where data in itself is the primary object of study. So you might say, oh, of course, statistics is like where you study data. We learn how to work with data, but data science is essentially trying to marry statistics with machine learning, with programming. I think so. In the strategy, we talk about how data science should be embedded in the AI in the school curriculum at all levels, not just school, but also in universities, and not just in people who are doing sort of STEM, but also people who are doing humanities, who are doing arts, and medicine. That they all need to understand different aspects of data science. I mentioned earlier about like data as a new code. Many years, a few years ago, software was the key thing. But now, you can get software for free. So even if companies like Microsoft and Google, they want to sell cloud computing to you, and then they just throw in the software because they understand that data is the key thing, and people who control the data, countries which control the data, are going to be the sort of the winners. So, just also wanted to talk about briefly, this is my last slide, and then I'll open up for questions and discussion. People are also coming up with scores of AI, like about AI and jobs, how different industries are, what is the AI exposure score? So for example, here, this is a study from Brookings Institute based on a PhD thesis from Mark Webb from Stanford. And what they did was they looked at the job profiles, and then they looked at the US patents, and then they tried to see, are there patents to do certain tasks within a job? And then they aggregated that, and they came up with these scores. So for example, on the left-hand side, you see this industrial sector, and on the second column is the employment in 2017, how many people are employed in this industry? And then what is the standardized AI exposure score of that industrial sector? So for example, if you look at manufacturing, more than 12 million people in the US are employed in this sector, and the standard AI exposure score is 0.61. On the other hand, if you go to educational services down, 13 million people are employed, and it has a low, it has a negative AI exposure score. So at least according to this study, things which are above positive, have a positive AI score, are slightly more susceptible to AI than those which are in the negative range. And this study can be mapped into Qatar. So on the right-hand side, I just got this data from the statistics department in Qatar, and list economic activity, and also the breakdown by Qatari males, Qatari females, non-Qatari males, and non-Qatari females. And actually, you can apply these standardized AI exposure scores into Qatar, and can actually also calculate what is the AI exposure score here. So I think in general, as career counselors, it's good to be aware of how, which industries are, what is the level of exposure of AI in each industry, and also, what are from the talent perspective, what kind of skill sets, as I mentioned about data science, is needed for people to not just develop AI technology, but also be aware of how to use AI. What is the role of, just to keep reiterating how important data is, and what is the role of data in AI. So with that, I'll stop here, and sorry for rushing through this quickly, because I want to spend some time taking questions and having a discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjay. It was a very enlightening presentation from your part. One of the questions that popping out of my head, there has been a great discussion around the impact of AI and job automation in the future trends in different industries. And people often tend to focus on the jobs that they will become obsolete versus the jobs that they will be created. So one big question that comes to my mind is about what kind of skills, transferable skills, our youth can develop in order to be more relevant with the exposure to AI automation future.
Yeah, so the slide that I'm currently showing in some sense captures some part of your question. Here, at least according to this study, like for example, finance and insurance is more susceptible to AI than say healthcare and educational services. But I think the bigger point is that I think people, students and everybody, I guess, all of us need to be aware of, at least currently, the trend seems to be that data will play a very big role, and the ability to transform data, to infer, patterns from data, and how to utilize, AI technology. So not only if you are like a, programmer or a computer scientist, who's developing AI technology, but also if you are a consumer of AI, for example, you could be a lawyer, right? And there you need to look at different case history. How do you use AI technology to essentially search in a proper way, how to transform information from one format to another format? Essentially, if you look at most of our jobs these days is about transforming data. We get data in one format, one spreadsheet, and we, use our knowledge to convert it into another spreadsheet. And I think this skill set needs to be, become part of our teaching, a part of our training. And I think that's, I get just to reiterate, I think it's the importance of data, not just for creating new technology, but also to it's going to have impact everywhere. So I hope I answered that question.
I think it's a good chance for everyone if they want to address the questions. I have many more to ask you, but I want to give the opportunity to our attendees also to express.
Yes, please. Anybody else?
Would you like to give us a page?
Yes, I was just going to build on your question, Sini. Dr. Sanjay, so for example, if we have high school students who obviously can't do a whole lot outside of the country this summer, and let's say they're maybe strong in math and they're thinking of considering a career in AI, are there any other skill sets, coding or learning Java or C++ or whatever it might be, that you would recommend that students learn that they could utilize over the summer to further enhance their knowledge and better prepare them for a career in AI?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, I know some people who are doing exactly that. They are here in Qatar. They can't go anywhere in the summer, and they are actually going to Coursera, and taking courses in AI and taking a course in machine learning, taking course in programming. There are also courses in data ethics, So there are lots of courses now that are available. I know about in Coursera, but I'm sure there are many other platforms where it's very similar. So I think, yeah, this is a good opportunity, in the lockdown to take advantage of that and learn. Yes.
Thank you. Do any of our participants have questions they would like to address to Dr. Sanjay?
Maybe I went too fast. I don't know.
Well, I actually have another question for you.
Sure.
You mentioned, and I'm really happy that you brought up the fact that people are concerned that AI and robots will take over their jobs. And I'm really happy that you mentioned that and said it's not so much that they're going to take over jobs, but more that it will change the way that the job currently works. And I think you used the term augmented job. Can you elaborate a little bit on that and maybe provide an example for those of us who maybe aren't as familiar with what an augmented job might look like? So you can tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so let me give you a concrete example. Suppose you are, because I was trying to collect some data about that. Suppose you are a radiologist, for example, working in a hospital, So, you can actually, people have done surveys, asking them how much and how do they divide their time, okay? And it turns out, you would think a radiologist is mostly just looking at, say, X-rays and trying to interpret them and, write a report. But that's actually a small portion of their work, They spend a lot of time in teaching and supervision, some part in interpretation, some part in writing the report. So, the diagnosis part could potentially be replaced with, you could give an X-ray image to quote unquote an AI system, and it could say, okay, here's a fracture, for example, right? So that part could, to a certain extent, in some limited cases, it can be automated at the moment. But, understanding the context, giving proper advice, all that part will continue requiring a human to use their experience. So I think in some sense, the radiologists could become more productive, So that's one example of one sort of concrete example where there's actually data to back up that AI augmentation is where the future is, rather than AI sort of full AI replacement.
We have one question that Mr. Fadi would like to ask. Fadi, would you like to go on and unmute yourself?
Hi, this is Fadi from the Ministry of Education. If you can just elaborate a little bit about AI and our education system and school system. You don't see much done about this part. Have you guys done any research? How much stuff been integrated in the education system about AI? How much they're preparing those kids so when they go out in real life, since AI is going to take over a lot of jobs, are they prepared?
So, we ourselves have not done work, but what we have recommended is that, in fact, through the Ministry of Transportation, we do plan to approach the Ministry of Education, because this strategy was done in conjunction with them. One thing we do recommend is can they be like a national curriculum on data science, for example, which could, where we teach different aspects of data science throughout the school curriculum. Can Qatar actually, can that be done? And that would actually really help people and students become familiar with, what are the strengths and also what are the weaknesses of AI? Because there's a lot of hype around AI. It's not clear. Sometimes people say you can do anything with AI, but that's not true. At the moment, the success of AI has been in two areas primarily. One is language, and the other is vision. So these are very important cognitive technologies, as language translation and computer vision. And you see that in, when you go to Facebook, for example, you upload an image and it can identify who the person is. So I think the underlying technology behind that, the principles of that, I think at different levels of sophistication can be infused in all parts of, can be at all levels of the curriculum. And I think if the Ministry of Education could take that on, and make it do something with that, that would be that would really enliven the Qatari AI ecosystem, I think.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, Sini, I believe you're on mute. I think you're trying to speak, but I think you're on mute.
Okay, so Dr. Taj has the next question. Would you like to come forward, Dr. Taj?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sanjay. And I have just a broad question for the situation within the state of Qatar. We know that Qatar has undertaken major steps in the area of artificial intelligence. But for the purpose of this session, would you recommend school and university career advisors to concentrate on careers within the field of artificial intelligence, like data scientists and others? Or would it be better to concentrate on the impact of artificial intelligence in the workplace? And how would this relate to their education and training and skills development perspective?
Yeah, I think people should follow whatever, just because AI is a hot area doesn't mean, you get into AI, of course, and start, you don't have to become a computer scientist. I think you should do what you like, but I think it's good to be aware that AI is going to impact many disciplines, almost all areas, and they need to understand how, what are the, where in their area it can have an impact, and how and what, what technologies should they be familiar with to leverage AI within whatever they do. I think that's that, for example, if you are a writer or you're a journalist, a lot of, I think I was mentioning at one time about this, that now you can write short news reports by just looking at data. So I give you a data about a sports game, for example, and you can actually create a story around that. So journalism will be impacted through AI. And similarly, if you're a history major, you need to be aware that you can now get text, historical text, and then you can use AI to sort of link different historical narratives and text. And if you understand how that can be done through AI, then you will have an advantage over those who are not familiar with that. So I think developing AI technology is not just the, very few people will do that because, very few people get into technology fields. But I think the key is that whatever things that interest you, you work in those, but be aware of what are the possibilities.
Mm-hmm. Well, building on this answer, Dr. Sanjay, very illuminating. But in the strategy within the state of Qatar, artificial intelligence strategy, as far as implementation is concerned, do you have anything that schools and education sector and career counselors would help in implementing those parts of the strategy?
So the only thing we mentioned, and I think this is something that could be elaborated further, is that as I mentioned earlier, like data science should be one of the key areas that need to be sort of made part of curriculum. And if you're a school counselor, you need to sort of tell students and parents that they need to learn about that, and in the curriculum, if they can influence the school curriculum through the ministries or whatever the mechanism is. In private school, it could be a different mechanism. Public school, it could be a different mechanism. then that needs to be, that's how the implementation of the strategy will be realized. If teaching of data science and which underpins AI can be made part of the curriculum. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. Also, I think, it's important to give, there's a sort of a halo around AI. There's also a lot of myths around AI. I think it's good to, try to shatter some of the myths. It's also good to, when I look at, my kids are now older, but I have some friends whose kids are younger, and I look at their textbooks. Some of the examples that they use when they teach, say, mathematics or physics or chemistry or biology, it's still a little bit, they could certainly use modern examples. So, for example, just to give you, there's a very big Qatar genome project going on, right? And if you teach biology, or why don't we use examples from there and show how AI can be used to extract patterns from genomic data and find out, if local population is susceptible to certain diseases, how the work that is being done. And how you can use AI and machine learning techniques. Machine learning, by the way, is like a sub branch of AI, which is designing algorithms like machine learning to learn from data. So the curriculum needs to be sort of updated with modern AI-driven examples. I think that will really expose students to AI. And I don't think it'll take a lot of it'll take some effort, but it'll not take a lot of effort to, especially if you give examples from within Qatar. It'll contextualize it. It'll say, okay, things are happening in Qatar rather than some faraway land. And I think that's the beauty of, in some sense, one beauty of artificial intelligence is we can take local examples, and that'll really contextualize what students are learning, and make them think that and understand that AI is something that's happening right now. It's happening within their neighborhood, and they can actually be part of it.
Dr. Sanjay, I have two very interesting questions from Dr. Hamda. Okay. The first of which, do you know which universities offer such courses of study locally? And the second question is if you have any idea about countries who offer some teaching of AI in their schools, in their K-12 system.
So, local universities, I think the AI, CMUQ, I know has a program in AI. And of course, HBKU also has programs. I'm sure, I'm not sure about Qatar University, but I'm sure they also have one. But CMUQ is the one that comes to my mind locally. I think in this, I think there's an effort being made in many countries about data science. There's a whole within the. When I used to be in Australia, there was a big effort to make data science as part of the high school curriculum, and in conjunction with programming. So I haven't checked that, where it's now officially a part of the national curriculum, but I know discussions were going on in Australia, I think 5-6 years ago. So I'm sure countries are making, are trying to do that. So either having a separate, discipline, like, like a separate discipline like data science, a subject like data science, or it could be, or it's being made part of the math curriculum or the statistics curriculum. So, and of course, programming. So, sometimes, what happens is that because AI is often associated with computer science, and computer science is associated with programming, people think that AI needs to, to do AI, you need to know programming. But I think the principles of AI are in some sense decoupled from programming to a certain extent. And so I think there's some confusion about that. I think that's what the different computing bodies are trying to, and computing associations and the statistics associations are trying to come together to come up with something which is acceptable in a sort of a broader context. So to be specific, I think I know Australia is having an initiative on having data science as part of the curriculum, but I'm not sure at what stage it is, whether it's being whether it's a core part or it's an optional part, I don't know yet.
Thank you so much for answering these two questions. We just need to be mindful about the time. We still have 6 minutes. So if somebody else would like to take the opportunity and address any questions to Dr. Sanjay, this is the right time.
If no question, can I ask this as a final one, please?
Please
Yes,
go
please.
ahead, Dr.
Yes.
Taj.
Okay, Dr. Sanjay, in as much as we are presenting this to school counselors and university advisors, and in as much as there are some majors in artificial intelligence, so given your experience, what kind of career options for an artificial intelligence major would be?
Also, there are huge options. For example, we in QCRI we are getting we always get contacted by industry to do some work with them. For example, we worked with different parts of QCRI. Have worked with Al Jazeera to look at to do personalized news. There's a project in QCRI on, as I mentioned, fake detection. Media companies are very interested in that. We worked with Qatar Airways for their optimizing the cargo. There's another team in QCRI working with Qatar Airways to do next destination prediction. There's so much work using in a cybersecurity group for using using cybersecurity techniques, a lot of data and that to protect the cybersecurity infrastructure, the IT infrastructure. In say oil and gas, there is a specific project is about what's called predictive maintenance. The parts, for example, of different oil installations need to be replaced. Can you predict when they will need to be replaced? Earlier, it was more preventative maintenance. Now it's become predictive maintenance. We've worked with Boeing on that also, Boeing research. So the areas are in medicine, as I already mentioned about, medical imaging, electronic health records. I think you name an area, and there's a big need for AI skills.
We have one last question from Marie. How we can encourage female to enter this field?
Yeah, I think in QCRI we actually have a program where we encourage female students, high school students, to come and interact with the scientists. Also, it's so that's one way. Also, we have like AI scientists and female scientists and engineers in QCRI, and they have mechanisms of creating sort of meetings where other females are being invited to participate. So yeah, I think these are the different. So one, when I used to be in Sydney, one way to attract females in engineering was, they had a lot of interest in biomedical. So what we had noticed that in biomedical engineering, there was a lot of female interest from female students. So we used to really expanded that part. So I think there are lots of things that can be done. Just, I think, of course, in the end, you just want to have role models and show that, this can be done by females and males equally well. So, yeah.
Well, we have just 1 minute until we close the session. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask. Yes, Fadi?
Is it possible to do some kind of workshop, informational workshop for the students about AI and how they can integrate it in, on their own until the education system will start doing the changes? So how can they learn about it? How they can apply it while they're studying, stuff like this? Is it possible to do some kind of workshop, information workshop for the students? We can set it up.
Yeah, certainly. I think I think we in QCRI we've done that. We have an education coordinator who has already organized AI workshops with students. I can put you in touch with Dr. Eman Fetouri, and this has already taken place.
How can we connect with you guys, either through QCDC or just you and us, our report,
We will be sharing at the end of the event the presentation and the recording, and also Dr. Sanjay's contact details with everyone who participated, so you can immediately connect with him and his team.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you, Cindy, for doing the whole thing.
Most welcome. It's a pleasure to have you all in our company. Special thanks goes out to QCRI and Dr. Sanjay Chawla for sharing so many information with us today. With this, I would like to encourage you to fill in the survey before you leave our session today. And just to give you heads up, we will have our next Career Cafe in mid-July. So stay tuned. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Dr. Sanjay. It was a pleasure hosting you. Thank you, Paige.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Sanjay.
Thanks a lot. Thanks. Okay, bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Stay healthy and safe.
Yes, you too, everybody. Bye.
Bye.